If you want to learn the process to embodying and empowering the feminine spirit, then check out the book, Healing the Feminine Energy and the Wounds of Your Inner Child. All right, what's up, guys? So in this video, we're going to be speaking about being the type of guy who's worth submitting to, or for a woman having the great perspective on what type of man is worth submitting to. So in this video, we're joined by the lovely
Iman.
Yeah, so we're going to speak about together. She helps coach women on energy healing. She does women's circles. She also helps women work on self-development, feminine energy, and just overall happiness, I would say, right? That's how I see it. Is there anything else you want to add on that?
That's great.
Do a little plug. All right, so we know that this is a big topic, right? You always see online people talking about leadership, submission. Oh, I wouldn't ever submit to a man, And, I think it's crazy because most women generally want the type of guy who's able to lead or take charge. Would you agree with that or no?
I think I would agree with that. Yeah, I think most women do want a man with a plan, someone who is able to give direction, focus, and generally just lead. But there's a difference between leading and control, which I know we've talked about in previous videos.
Yeah, so I can actually understand why some women would be turned off when men speak about that stuff. And you've said before, like, talking about how just the word submit can be, can cause friction for a lot of women, So do you want to go into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the word itself can ignite feelings of intense emotion for a lot of women because they associate it with some trauma that they've had, whether it's emotional abuse or sexual abuse. And so that word submission starts to ignite when they hear it, especially in the context of romantic relationships. It starts to ignite some intense emotions within them, and they start to feel really uncomfortable because it's triggering a trauma response for them where they've had experiences where they've perhaps submitted or been cooperative with a man who has exerted some form of control over them and misused that sort of cooperation that they've handed over. And so for a lot of women, that word just doesn't feel right to them, and using it can feel very emotional.
See, I like what you said as well about it doesn't feel right to them. Because, it's interesting. A woman's able to feel if it makes sense, and she could give one level of, and before I go into that, what you also used was the word cooperation, which is a very perhaps better way to think about it. I talk about submission as being the highest level of cooperation that you could give to someone. And we will give cooperation where we see it necessary. Even me as a man, I say to myself, I could happily follow the lead of someone who's able to elevate me or offer protection to me, let's say through, it could be a mentor and so on. There's actual benefits to doing that. You would never tell a woman to just submit because she's just supposed to. There has to be some level of benefit for her. And that helps her to then feel that it makes sense, because why would she want to do it if it doesn't feel good and it doesn't actually make sense? So let's say we're saying what are some traits that women should look for to know that it's safe to submit to a guy or give the highest level of cooperation? That's a good way to put it.
I think this might be different for other women, but me personally, I would look for a man who is or who believes in some higher power, whether that be God or whether that be source, universe, however you prefer to refer to it. But a man that recognizes a higher power is a man that understands the power of submission for elevation, is a man that understands the power of devotion and will submit himself to a higher power so he would be worthy of having my submission, because he is a man who understands that there is something beyond him, but I can trust him because he is guided by the divine or guided by God or source. And so he is one that I would perhaps trust over someone who doesn't perhaps have that connection.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the powerful thing about that is actually that, when you look at history, kings, ruling over the kingdom was supposed to still be accountable to, let's say, it could be the Bible, or basically he still has to be accountable to God. And if he wasn't, the people wouldn't actually accept that. They would say, no, that's, we're not tolerating that. We don't want to follow a king who isn't, led by God. Because if you have a king and he just rules over the land, what tends to happen, maybe not always, but what tends to happen and happens in relationships is the king will abuse the power. But if there's some element of God-fearingness or, something like that, she can trust, okay, I'm still submitting to the program. And the program is just being worked through him. It's just that he's, a part of the machine. When we look at submission as a whole, how it's supposed to benefit her is she is submitting to him because he's leading and following the program that she also trusts. So a Christian woman doesn't mind submitting to a Christian man because he's operating on the system of structure of Christianity. So to her, that's her way of submitting to God. She's submitting to God still through her man, and so on. Does that make sense, or do you want to add or
It does.
disagree anywhere?
Just to add a few things on that, actually, I loved what you said about sort of submitting to God through him, or I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but for me, that's what I would do. When I'm looking at my partner, I am submitting to the God, the divine that lives within him, and recognizing him as the vessel and the channel. And it would be the case for vice versa, for him to look at me as the vessel and the channel. But when it comes to the highest level of cooperation with your partner, I think the reason why it's so important for him to submit or to be guided by a higher power is twofold, really. One, it sort of sets the example that it's okay for me to do it and to submit to the God within him, because he is comfortable submitting to a higher power and to a source beyond him, outside of him. But also it provides a level of morality that you can then trust.
What do you mean?
Because he is operating on what you called programming, essentially. He's operating on a programming that you can get with, because it is the same sort of frequency that you want to operate on. So then it becomes easier for you to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the next part we could talk about is the control aspect. So you talked earlier about, what was it you said, too much control? What phrase did you use earlier?
There's a difference between controlling and leading, and it's the control aspect that has led to a lot of trauma for women, which has then led to being triggered by the word submission.
So then the alternative, which could shift how people perceive it, and even how, the guy perceives it too, and his role in the whole thing, is it safe, or does it make sense for her to be able to gift him or surrender control to him, because she trusts that when he has control, he won't abuse it, like we was talking about before. So then you see, you spoke about this before, how instead of the word submit, there's an empowering element if it's looked at as surrender.
Yes, I do talk about that sometimes. I prefer actually to use the word surrender, because there's a level of devotion that I feel to that word, and it reminds me of my surrendering to God and surrendering to the powers, the universal energies and the powers of the universe. And as I surrender to the God within my man. and I recognize the divinity that lives within him. And so as I'm surrendering to him, I'm actually surrendering to him as the vessel and the channel for that energy to flow through him. But I think what's really important, which is what you kind of touched upon, is the fact that actually it should be empowering for a woman to choose who she submits or surrenders to, because not every man is going to be worthy of that energy for you. And it should hold men to a higher standard to then know, well, if I need to have, or if I want to have the highest level of cooperation from my partner, from my woman, then I'm going to need to be held to a higher standard in order to be able to achieve that. So by women actually empowering themselves to say, well, actually, you haven't demonstrated the qualities that would provide me with enough safety and structure or whatever it is to be able to submit to you, I'm not going to choose you, and I'm going to give my submission or my cooperation or my surrender to this person who has shown that level of discipline or structure that I'm looking for, that is worthy of that energy from me. Then we actually begin to empower ourselves as to who we're choosing. But by default, that makes the men want to elevate themselves to be at that standard where they are then almost chosen.
That makes sense. I love that. I guess the last thing we'll say before we wrap it up is that with this, it's necessary for the feminine to be selective, you know? Because if you're not super selective, then you find yourself in situations where you realize he's not a guy worth, you know, giving that control to. Or you find yourself in abusive relationships, or, you know, many people talk about being with narcissists and so on. You know, you have to be very selective, you know? Anything else you want to say on that before we wrap it up?
That was a great summary, thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so if you want to check out my books, by the way, Healing the Feminine Energy and part 2 of the series, Nurturing Your Feminine Energy, has come out, and it's on Amazon. Would very much appreciate if you have read the book, you know, leave a review. It helps to spread the message to other people. But then also, we have written and co-authored a book too, you know, tell them about it.
It's a free ebook, and that is about 5 things that could hurt your femininity. So it's definitely worth checking out if you're trying to heal your feminine energy and understand the difference between the things that can help you and the things that can hurt you.
Exactly. And it's free. So, you know, why not? But until next time, comment down below, let Reemus know, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. More than any other time in human history, a restoration, a repair, a respect for the feminine energy is needed. And if you want to check out the process to healing the feminine energy, then you can check out the book, which is available digitally or in print form.